Prisoner held hostage by ISIS is dead, this time a 26-year-old American aid worker. We talk about it tonight. From New York City, this is the Daily Wrap. And welcome to the Wrap, everybody. I'm Joe Contra, and on our panel tonight, he's the co-host of Steele and Unger on Sirius XM Radio, Rick Unger. She's a powerhouse attorney from the city of brotherly love. Heather Hansen is here. And he's a former FBI special agent and Navy SEAL, as well as the founder and CEO of United States Continued Service, LLC. Jonathan Gilliam joins us. Interesting crew we've got here tonight. And thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's go right to the Daily Download. Well, I wish I could say this news is shocking, but sadly, no more, it isn't. ISIS-held American prisoner Kayla Mueller is dead. Just 4 days ago, ISIS announced that Kayla was killed as a result of an American airstrike against the terrorist group. As of now, we don't know exactly how she died. What we do know is that responsibility falls squarely on ISIS. It didn't take long for the president to denounce the killing. The commander-in-chief showing his outrage by having the White House press office release a statement. And here it is. The press release, first 4 paragraphs talk about how amazing Kayla's life was, and it was, which is certainly true. But only the last paragraph addresses ISIS. Quote, ISIL is a hateful and abhorrent terrorist group whose actions stand in stark contrast to the spirit of people like Kayla. On this day, we take comfort in the fact that the future belongs not to those who destroy, but rather to the irrepressible force and human goodness that Kayla Mueller shall forever represent. And that's it. The president once again comes off as weak, as disinterested. Perhaps he thinks this ISIS thing really isn't that big of a deal. I have to replay this video from yesterday. It really is telling of what the president thinks of the war on terror.
Do you think the media sometimes overstates the sort of level of alarm people should have about terrorism and this kind of chaos as opposed to a longer term problem of climate change and epidemic disease?
Absolutely. And, I don't blame the media for that. What's the famous saying about local newscasts, right? If it bleeds, it leads, right? You show crime stories and you show fires, because that's what folks watch. It's all about ratings.
It's all about ratings. This ain't American Idol. I have a feeling that video is going to haunt Mr. Obama forever. Rick, you're a big fan of the president. You have to admit that this response via a press release as opposed to going in front of cameras comes off as weak.
I think weak is a dramatic overstatement. Look, the problem that we have now, and I should say up front, I actually am very supportive of re-examining our policy. I am very much for getting much tougher with ISIL. I'll just say that at the outset. But, I've spent most of the day today listening to people tearing apart little parcels and bits of what the president said yesterday. It's not what he says, it's what he does. I don't like that he won't use the phrase Islamic terrorist. I think he should. If you go in there and you commit an act of terrorism while you're yelling Allah Akbar, it's Islamic terrorism. So let's just say it.
You said does, though. What he does. He didn't go in front of a camera today. What's with the press release?
You know what? He probably doesn't want to have to go in front of a camera every single time something terrible like this happens.
You're saying it might be an overreaction.
Well, I'm not saying it's an overreaction. I'm saying that it doesn't help the situation. Frankly, what I think would help the situation if people will stop with the stupid criticism, focus on the policy. If you got a beef with the policy, you should bring it up and let's push the White House to look at the policy. But let's not with the stupid stuff, and that's what I've been hearing all day.
Heather.
Don't you think if there was more action, there'd be less criticism of his words? He just doesn't do anything. There's been no real action.
He's killed more terrorists than any president ever.
But when it comes to ISIS, he's done very little, and he's talked very little. And I don't have a problem with what he did today. I think that was probably in respect to the family, who probably would prefer that type of response. And I also think that in this particular circumstance, given the nature of her death allegedly by the airstrikes, it was a proper response. The stuff that he said yesterday and everything that he has said leading up to this point is just not strong enough. And if you're not going to speak strongly, you better act strongly.
What would be different? And what would you do differently than what he's doing with ISIL?
I think he needs to get a group together that would do something more proactive.
What?
I don't know.
Well,
I
then
don't
you can't
pretend
I
to
think
be
what
that.
Rick is leading towards is, would you agree to ground troops?
Yeah,
in
because
Syria
if
and
not,
Iraq?
what are you complaining
And I'm
about?
going to actually,
I actually would.
John,
I would too.
John, I want you to answer that question because obviously you have a little more experience in this.
Sure.
regard.
So I think your quote just a second ago was he's killed more
Right.
terrorists than any president. Okay. So if you're going to eradicate roaches from a house, right? I could kill more roaches than anybody else if I don't kill them all or push them back to a manageable number. Doesn't matter.
That's
They're
fair.
going to come back.
That's fair.
What
but you
needs-
can't say he hasn't done anything.
Well, he hasn't done anything effectively. And see, here's the problem: is that there is a DOD full of executives that cow down to the president, to the administration, to a group of people who run this country that know how to get reelected. They don't know how to run a war. We need war fighters, and those war fighters need to come up with a plan that targets fundamental Islamic Mohammedanism. That's what this is. It is not
Can you
radical.
define what
evil
Mohammedanism
people.
is?
Yeah,
Mohammedanism-
this is evil
I haven't
people
heard
what
that
this
too often.
is.
Fundamental Islamic Mohammedanism is the same Islam that Muhammad himself practiced. These are the same tactics. It's just 1,000 years later, and they have a lot more technology. The same thing happened 100 years ago this year to Armenians in Turkey, where they killed half of all Armenians that were on the face of this earth. 1.5 million gone. They're never going to come back. Same tactics that Muhammad used, same tactics being used now.
That sounds
Can
like
I make a
genocide.
point? Here's the reality of it. This is why people have to get together and stop with the silly talk. I'm not saying what you said was silly talk. I think all three of us agree, sitting here, that we should probably have boots on the ground and go for it. Kill these evil people.
Look what happened in
But let
in
me finish the
Kuwait.
point. I understand, but let me finish the point. The point is, the American public so far doesn't want that. And put yourself in the shoes of the president for a minute. You've got an overwhelming percentage of the public saying don't do it. The three of us agree he should, but you've got the public saying not to. What would you do?
Can I say this? And Heather, I want you to agree with me or not on this. The American public is by and large okay with what is effective.
That's right.
And if the president makes a decision to put boots on the ground and he does it correctly, which was done in Kuwait, they will be behind it. That's
Well,
the
they
Well,
are
and
so
I think,
far.
when you say what would
They may
you
be.
do,
Last
what would
word,
you do?
Heather.
I would ask someone who knows, and I think that that's what we need to do. We need to get together
he's got
people
the
who
military
have
for that.
the means to make this something happen.
He's got the military for that. They're supposed to know.
Right, but that's what they need to do. They need to, exactly what John said, they need to put together a group who actually will go in and take care of this problem.
And that would have to be the last word. The only thing I would say is that I would like to see a poll now saying, do we need boots on the ground in terms of taking out ISIL?
I agree.
We'll see about that. Anyway, coming up next, drama from the Supreme Court over gay marriage in Alabama. We've got the details next. And a little later, an all-girls college in Pennsylvania opening its doors to diversity. You'll never guess who they're letting in. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everybody. I'm Joe Contra from New York City. As we mentioned yesterday on the show, the Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling allowing gay marriage to take place in Alabama, of all places, making it the 37th state to allow gay marriage. What we didn't know were two judges, Clarence Thomas and Antonin Scalia, were furious over the decision. Justice Thomas, with Scalia as a co-signer, filed an angry dissent that called out fellow judges for looking, quote, the other way as another federal district judge casts aside state law, instead of leaving laws in place until the Supreme Court rules. Justice Thomas went one step further, writing, this acquiescence may well be seen as a signal of the court's intended resolution of that question. This is not the proper way to discharge our Article 3 responsibilities, and it is indecorous, am I pronouncing that correctly? Indecorous, okay, thank you, for this court to pretend that it is. I'm not a lawyer. So, Heather,
just
Thomas and
played one on
Scalia are
TV.
basically saying that by making this ruling, the Supreme Court has shown their hand on its ultimate ruling over gay marriage. Would the Supreme Court been better just to not allow a lower court,
Absolutely.
or not to overrule the lower court?
They
I
should have
say.
just waited it out. Listen, this is the reality of our precedent. We wait it out. We wait until the final decision has been made. And I think that's what Thomas's problem was. It wasn't so much that they've tipped their hand, which is what everyone's focusing on. It's that we haven't, and he says this, we didn't give the people of the state of Alabama the deference that they deserve. What we normally do in these situations is we wait until there's a final ruling, and then we make the states then follow suit. But here they said, you don't have to wait till a final ruling. We know what it's going to be, wink, wink. Go ahead and do what you want to do. And it's inconsistent and it's not appropriate.
Rick, you're a lawyer.
Yeah, actually, Heather and I usually agree on these, but we're not now. You know, Justice Thomas's idea of turning aside is their idea, but I think the rest of the court would say they were supporting a federal judge who got it right. I don't know. What do you want these people to do? They can see what the law is. They can see that the judge had it right, the appellate court had it right, the lower court had it right. The law is unconstitutional. Why should they continue to stay when it's not legal?
Right now, the Sixth Circuit has said that it is not unconstitutional. And until they've made the final decision, you've got differing opinions.
Is Alabama in the Sixth Circuit?
No.
No.
But so you've got differing opinions. There is no law of the land, as it were, until that final decision
That's fine, but then if the final decision were to come down, then the law survives and there's no need for a stay. It'll be what it'll be. But I think they were absolutely right. And by the way, what they're bitter about is because this does tell you where the court's going.
Well, that's right.
It does tell you what the majority is going to do, and they're ticked off they don't have extra months to make some deals to change it.
I don't disagree with that, but I do think that we have to give deference to the states. And until it's final, and listen, that's consistent with what we've done. A year ago,
about the
there was
lower
a very...
federal courts? No deference
It
to
doesn't
them?
matter. They get deference when the final decision is made. But a year ago, the exact same thing happened in Colorado. And there the court stayed it until they made a final decision. That's the way the process works. And they just kind of jumped over a step here
I'm not sure you
because
should
they knew
wait
where it was
when we're
going.
talking about people's rights under the law and their
I
equal
understand
protection.
that argument, but when we start making exceptions to the rules, when you don't agree with it, it's going to be a problem. So that's why we have a set of rules to keep it consistent.
Majority's right.
Majority right.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that.
I understand
It's the
you.
process
It's the
that we have to
process
honor.
that's troubling. Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, you know, from a tactical perspective. No, actually, I'll tell you this. I do have a degree in political science. I'm not an attorney, but I have studied some of this stuff, and I have a degree in psychology. Where that comes in handy is looking at things like this. You know, when our Constitution was written and these things were created, it didn't cost as much to drag things through the legal system. But the Constitution was made to ensure freedom for all people and ensure our rights. And I just think the way these things like gay marriage, for instance, are being bogged down in the court system, what's happening is we're forgetting the thing which is actually on trial here, which is rights. Do people have their rights? Just because, and listen, I'm a Christian, and I know a lot of people, you know, from the Christian faith have a problem with this. I don't necessarily believe it should be called marriage, and I don't even get into that argument. What I do have a problem with, though, is if two people want to be together, they should have all the rights as anybody else that wants to be together. And I think that is something that needs to go through the court system, and it needs to go through quick. These were issues where it gets bogged down.
Go that quick in real life.
Yeah.
But that's a problem that we have because we're talking about people's rights, which the Constitution ensures.
But I think it's a problem, but it's also a benefit. I agree with you 100%. And let it be said, I agree with the majority, what we're going to say here. But what it has done is allowed people who don't agree, even perhaps our president, to slowly come to the understanding that this is the way it's going to be. And it makes it a little bit easier. So in part, the time that it takes gives people time to sort of adapt to it.
And I agree with that with certain things, but when it comes to somebody's freedom or somebody's rights, I don't think it should be something that should be bogged down.
And you're absolutely right. It is way too slow to get through the process. And every time the Republicans in Congress or in the Senate refuse to approve or give a hearing to a federal appellate judge or a federal district court judge that's been appointed by this administration, that's what bogs it down.
Because
we don't have the judges.
they want to get reelected. That's really the problem. And it happens on both sides of the aisle with different subjects.
Yeah, it does.
I just think when it comes to freedoms and ensuring
agree.
people's rights, there's certain things that should not be bogged down.
I want to get back for a moment too and focus on the states wanting to take back control from Washington. The Hill reported today state legislators are attempting to pull back power from the federal government by sponsoring over 200 bills that nullify numerous federal laws, including some firearms restrictions. So, Jonathan, are we just seeing a natural response from conservatives who are pushing back on the Obama administration?
Well, I think, again, whenever we have some of these issues that come up like this, there's going to be a natural pushback. I just find, I'm often, and Rick and I, we actually agree on a lot of things. He's liberal, I'm conservative, but I'm also a realist, and I like to think of things that are going to find the solution to this. That's my military background. That's the way I look at things. What is effective? What keeps this country free and moving forward? And that's where I have a problem with the Republicans when they push back on Obama about some things. I am no fan of the Obama administration at all. I think they're incompetent.
But you think they should pick and choose their fights better?
I think they should, and I think also some things they shouldn't fight on. I think that they're more concerned with whether or not they get
when
reelected.
the Constitution's involved.
That's correct.
But right now, the states a lot of the states are really upset about federal overreach. And a lot of states are getting together and forming a convention and really talking about pushing this. And it goes back to Thomas's dissent in this case, because he says we're not giving the states the respect that they deserve. And if there's no respect on both sides, we're going to come up with a constitutional problem.
Is the High Court overstepping its bounds here?
No, clearly not. And what's interesting is, as much as we all have this tendency to like states' rights, the boneheads that are being elected to these state legislators right now, who will pass these laws that have no chance of getting constitutional support, they're the reason that we shouldn't have this kind of control in the states, because they're doing a terrible job of it.
And that's the last word. Actually, it's not the last word. Indecorous was the word I was looking for before.
That's the last
And
word.
this is candor right here, okay? I'm not going to pretend I've ever heard of that word before. I've never seen that word before in my life.
You're an honest man.
Yes. Welcome, coming back in the Daily Wrap. White House scandal, it won't go away. This is the Daily Wrap only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everybody. I am Joe Concha, live from New York City. Well, the IRS, guess what? They're back in the news. And just when I thought I was done, just when I thought I was out, wait, I'm forgetting the line here. Well, I'll just let Michael Corleone handle this one.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
That was it. Otherwise, needless sequel, Godfather 3, released 14 years after Godfather 2, which was the greatest sequel of all time, and they put out 3 because somebody needed some money. Anyway, according to The Hill, as we get back on our script, the White House has refused a Freedom of Information request that publication, The Hill, requesting more than 500 documents related to the IRS targeting of the Tea Party groups. We've heard about that before. The Hill was interested in emails from 2013 as well as other correspondence. They specifically sought emails from former IRS official Lois Lerner, who is probably on a beach right now earning 20%, and Treasury officials, including Secretary Jack Lew. The Treasury Secretary General, however, has refused to release those 512 documents, citing exemptions from the law. The Hill, the publication, lost a follow-up appeal. Wow, go figure. And here's what the Hill wants to know. Will anyone be charged? Who knew what and when? Sounds very Nixonian. Heather, at this point of the Obama presidency, why not just release those emails?
Well, it makes you wonder, right? Because not only do they not release them, but then they had the document dump this week where they dumped 86,000 other documents on them. It really, and to quote another movie, follow the money and you'll find the corruption from all the president's men.
Very good.
Here, you've got the part of our government that's responsible for the money that's hiding things and giving reasons that just make no sense. They're saying it's personal privacy is one of the exemptions. Another is law enforcement. There's no criminal pursuit going on right now. So there's nothing to happen that should make these exemptions happen. It makes you wonder, and I don't know the answer.
Why is it whenever it comes to the IRS and we want to get information, hard drives are destroyed or things are lost or learners on vacation?
You don't believe those emails were lost? No?
It's very hard to lose an email these days.
Give me a show of hands. Who here believes that the IRS did something wrong in this matter?
No doubt.
We're going up with that.
We all agree with that,
Okay.
right? Who here believes the White House was involved?
Only...
Not sure. Okay, 2. So here's the reality of this. It doesn't matter what documents are released. You are always going to believe what you're going to believe. The fact of the matter is there is a legal basis for protecting certain documents, not unlike attorney-client. Well, they're saying that they are. And by the way, it wasn't the White House. You can attribute it to the White House. It was the same Treasury Inspector General who started all of this in the first place. So a guy who was an honest man when he was testifying to Congress is making these calls about not releasing these 500 out of 86,000 documents.
No, separate ones. And the thing is, just because they claim an exemption doesn't mean it exists. Right now, we've
Well,
got a
then
whole
take it to court.
Well, but it should, because we've got a whole separate,
Take it to
typical, similar argument going on about some pictures after 9/11, some of the detainees. And the exemptions that the government has claimed there are
But there's-
being
but
held
there's a
not to
procedure
be
for that.
right. But that procedure has to be done here because it does make a difference.
Do
And
it.
transparency is important. And we need to have. I mean, that's what the Freedom of Information Act is for.
And until the procedure plays out, and I agree with you completely, what do we have to presume?
Wow.
Well, let me just say,
Jonathan, perfect segue.
let me just say this, okay? Here's another movie quote for you. You can't handle the truth from A Few Good Men. All right?
1991.
That's
Jack
right.
Nicholson.
So the truth is, when you work in government, you give up your rights. When
That's
you
not
work,
true.
when you work in the government, you give up your rights of. I'm not saying all your rights, but your rights of certain protections of emails that are public knowledge, that are part of the government. You don't have a right
Including
to
military?
hold those. It's not my emails. I'm talking about the government emails, your
Yeah.
work emails. Those
Do you
belong
want-
to the government.
Yeah.
So here's the point I'm trying to make with this. You know, they don't have the right to not have those hard drives available. They don't have the right to withhold this information for the reasons that they are saying. When they're saying that these things are classified, when they're saying and then lying and saying that they're lost, what that's telling me as an investigator that they're lying, then they're minimizing the problem. Just like Brian Williams on NBC, you know, there's a problem here. And when I'm saying they don't have the rights, that's government property.
Yeah,
And we're
but you're-
allowing
wait, wait,
executives
wait.
to take
Wait,
these
wait, wait, wait.
rules and
Are
bend
you
them.
saying there are no circumstances where a government official should not be sharing a private email with the public? You're
You
a
give up
military,
that right.
really.
You give up that right when you work for the government.
So if I file a freedom of
If you
information,
want a private email, go get a private email.
If I want to file a freedom of information request asking for the location of the next bombing site in Iran, the government is obligated to give it to me.
when I say you're a part of the
same
government,
thing.
you're a part of the government, and so the government is overwatching itself. Those are not your emails; those belong to the government.
Right, and what they're saying
And
is
the
these are
investigators,
protected, and we're not going to turn them
But
over.
the investigators don't have access
By
to
the way,
them,
it's,
and that's
it's the
criminal.
Hill that's asking for it, not even another government branch.
they're not-
And
it's a newspaper.
unfortunately, we have to end it there. I'm just so happy that everybody threw in a movie line at some point. A Few Good Men. We had all the President's Men. A lot of men movies going on.
right about the sequel being the best sequel.
That's true. Coming up next, it's Political Potluck. It's the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's time for Political Potluck. And you know the drill. Political Potluck is where each of us brings a story to the party, just like bringing a dish to a potluck dinner. And again, I've never been to one in my life, but I'm here every night doing it. Age before beauty, Rick Unger. Let's start with you.
Well, if it's age before beauty, don't you want Jonathan?
That's a very good point. We'll have to go with
Yeah,
No,
I'm
we're
he's
beautiful
much
and young.
older than me.
let's do this inverse alphabetically, Unger.
So the
Nice.
the governor of Illinois today.
Blago?
Not Blago. Blago's long
Okay.
gone.
I hear that. I go,
Governor
Blago.
Rauner, Bruce Rauner, I think that's how you pronounce his
Muscle
name,
memory.
has told the world that he intends to do away with fair share in unions. Let me explain what that means. There are public unions that have people who work in the same collective bargaining group who are not members of the union. Under the law, the union has to represent those people. Because they represent them and they get the same deal that the union members get, they pay dues. Now, those dues can be segregated from political contributions under the law if that's what the person wants, but they do have to pay for what they get. Otherwise, they're not paying their fair share. The governor wants to do away with that. I think that is a terrible idea because it goes from a fair share to a fair ride.
Do you think that this will actually be held up? In other words, governors have had success lately against unions in Midwest states.
Well, they have, and I think Heather's going to point out a case that might prove to be critical.
Just within the last year, the Supreme Court said that they can do that. And part of it, the reason is because it's your First Amendment right not to engage in political speech. The idea is that all unions are political, everything they do is political, and therefore, even if they try to parse out the monies, ultimately you're giving money to something you don't want to. So I think the governor was quite brilliant here because he knew that argument, he knew that case, and he knew that the Supreme Court was sort of begging for an opportunity to shut this down, and he went for it.
Well, here's the issue. Heather could absolutely be right. On the other hand, they very carefully limited the case that she's talking about to, it was also in Illinois, and it involved health home care workers who they basically said they're not your typical worker in a public, they basically work for a private employer. They don't work for the city or something like that. Now, as Heather would point out and did to me earlier, in the majority opinion, Justice Alito definitely seemed to be looking for a reason to maybe extend it.
And we know the majority is corporation friendly, to say the
Right.
least. And so
But it won't be
it
fair
will
if
be-
they do.
Interesting.
It's a
John,
free
any
ride.
thoughts on this? I mean, you're in a military. That's obviously a band of folks that all march in step, and that's kind of like unions as well. Are you pro-union, anti-union?
Well, unions serve a purpose, and I saw this when I was in the Air Marshal. There was no unions, and the Air Marshals, when it first got stood up, was a complete basket case. I mean, there was no rhyme or reason why things were being done, and it was in desperate need of a unionization of what we were doing and of the people. That's what unions do. Right. But unfortunately, after unions exist for a while, then politics get in there, that's what gets lost. It becomes the last thing that they're concerned with. That's why we lost Twinkies for a while, because the union wasn't concerned with getting and keeping people's jobs. They were concerned with the union staying in power, and that's the problem.
Absolutely. It's a very fair point. And as I often complain, I am a big union supporter. I am not a supporter of current leadership in the unions.
And that'll be the last word on your potluck, Mr. Unger. Hanson, what do you got?
Oh, we saw this poll yesterday, the Fusion poll about millennials and how important they're going to be in this next election. I think 77% of them said that they were very likely to vote. And then you saw this week as well that Jeb Bush has now hired as his chief technology officer this guy who used to be the head of hipster.com. And he had some old tweets that were out there that said some inappropriate things about women, about Martin Luther King Jr., about gay people. And I'm just wondering how that's going to play with the millennials, and if it's going to play well enough to overcome perhaps the way that it won't play well with others. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, unfortunately, the poll we looked at from yesterday shows that millennials have no idea what's going on anyhow. They don't know who their senators are,
that.
so they're probably never even going to hear about this.
Just to clarify on what you just brought up, 77% of millennials don't know who won. Forget two. One of their state senators.
Isn't that frightening?
But they're very engaged. So whether you like it
They're
or
just
not,
not engaged
they're,
in politics.
They're engaged. They're not as informed as maybe we might like. But they may be by the time the next election comes along.
They better start advertising on Game of Thrones, because that's what they're engaged in.
That's right.
Right?
That's
No,
right.
but they're engaged in the
There's no
politics.
advertising on there, though. It's HBO.
Exactly. I know.
Yeah,
It's
but
not
guys,
TV. It's HBO.
That's not really fair to the millennials. I mean, I understand what the poll said, and
They don't know
I
who
found
their
that,
senator
listen, I
is.
get it, but I think that they are engaged in the things that are most important to them, and may not
Which
realize
is
the importance. Well, they
Getting
are
high, which I understand. That's important.
They
high.
what?
Yeah,
No,
they're
what's,
engaged in what's important to them.
Rick, that same poll showed that their biggest concern was the economy, and that's all of
But
our
they don't
biggest
know
concern.
who their senator is.
Listen, I get it, but they're going to learn, and in the meantime, are they going to be okay with somebody on Bush's panel that had these types of tweets out there?
But
Because
that's
I think a lot of the millennials are very open to gay people, very open to women's rights, and very open to Martin Luther
And
King Jr.
we gotta end it
Maybe
there.
they won't care about Bush anyhow.
Anyway, I'd just like to say, being from New Jersey, that I know that Robert Menendez and Cory Booker are my senators, and being a millennial, boom. Anyway, coming up next, more on Political Potluck. This is the Daily Wrap, and is only on Newsmax TV. I think I decided that music is too serious to be looking at a pot. Just saying. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Right now, we're talking about our favorite stories of the day. It's Political Potluck. Jonathan, your first time to dinner. What are you serving up?
Well, I just want to salute after hearing that music. I actually like that. But no, here's what I think. My thing that I think we see in the news every day, it's right in front of us, like if we're standing against the wall, if we back up a little bit, we're going to see the biggest story of all. And that's that politics and the DNC and the RNC are a bigger threat than ISIS to our national security. Our politics are such a disaster that there's no fixing any problem. And there used to be a day and age when there were kings and queens, and that's why our founding fathers came here and started a new country. But I don't think they realized that even more dangerous and harder to remove a king is a corrupt hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in place that you just cannot get rid of. There are 4 people I saw the other day: Nancy Pelosi, there's John Boehner, Harry Reid, and Mitch McConnell. All have been in office for over 30 years. So they are basically responsible for the majority of things that are wrong that have gone through Congress and the Senate.
But what do you do? I mean, they're being reelected. We talked about this
Right.
yesterday. They're being reelected. So what do you do? How do you fix it? It's got to start from the ground up. I think that's an overwhelming.
Constitutionalists, and I believe in our Constitution, I just think one thing that needs to be fixed, and I don't know if you have to do it in the Constitution or not, but politicians need to be held accountable. You're an attorney. Rick is kind of an attorney. So, but are you an attorney? No, you're an attorney.
Well, I'm a game show host.
Okay. So all three of you, if you
Stayed
don't
in
do
Holiday
your
Inn
job
last
and
night.
you injure the client, you can be sued for malpractice.
I wholeheartedly agree with your initial statement. I truly do. I completely feel that way. But ultimately, the fault for what you're saying rests with we, the people.
And listen, I don't doubt that at all. But
So
the
you
problem,
can't fix that
but
any
the
other way.
problem, yes, the problem that needs to be fixed is we can't get rid of them. There's nobody else to end these. some of
So
these
why
things.
not
we
term
can.
limits?
We can.
Term limits are good, but here's the problem.
Here's the downside.
If you injure me and you're my attorney, I'm the client, I get injured.
Mm-hmm.
But if they injure the country is liable to have
too
thousands of people die.
It's too subjective. You can't hold them legally responsible.
Well, I think there's a measure in place. I think now we're
Can't
starting
happen.
to see there's such big issues. If they don't get it right, people will die, or the country will be
It's always
majorly
been
injured.
Yeah,
that way,
right.
but how do you do that? You can't. You
Well, I think
cannot-
that's something that needs to be discussed. You can't
And
say
by the way,
it
if
can't.
there was liability, nobody would ever run for office.
Well, that's true.
But you can't say it can't. It needs to be. There needs to be dialogue in this. It needs to be in the
Educate
public
the
sector.
public.
But,
Educate
well,
the public.
Right. They're supposed to be accountable by an educated public,
Right.
and
There's
we're
the
the one
problem.
who. Yeah.
But that's the problem.
But that's
That's
we're
it.
voting them back in. These people that you're talking about, we're voting them back in.
Because they're the only ones on the ballot to vote for. And we don't push leaders forward. We don't educate people. You know, if you want to get a license, you have to go and take a test for that. If you want to have a baby, there's no license for it. If you want to vote for somebody, if you're born in a state, you register, boom, you go there.
Right, but as it should be, though. I think as it should be. I think people need to take the initiative to get more educated, and I think that maybe these millennials are going to do that.
I personally, and we have to end it there, I mean, having Nancy Pelosi around has been a treat, and why not keep her in even longer? It's been over 30 years, as you said, right? A combined 120 years of the people you just named.
That's unbelievable.
That's depressing. Anyway, last but not least, it's my turn. And speaking of depressing, I want to talk to you about February for a moment. This is the month of my birthday, and that's pretty much where it ends as far as being a great month. In fact, it is the most depressing period of the year. Most polls and surveys say January actually is the most depressing month because it's after the holidays and you get the credit card bill from said holidays, and then you're like, this is horrible. But I would say that at least in January, you have the NFL playoffs, you have bowl games, you have people that leave their lights on for an annoyingly long period of time, like late January, take them down already. But it still feels kind of festive. February, it's when it gets dark and brutal. And my TV is dominated by women's basketball like it was last night, Rick. It was horrible. I'm like, I can't find a game. And I got to watch Georgia at South Carolina. Give me something to work with. And Valentine's Day, by the way, very overrated. I tried, I swear, honey, to get a reservation at your favorite restaurants all day today. Oh, no, we're booked. You got to do it 3 months in advance. Come on. So now we got to go out the night after, and then it feels cheapened. It's just, February is just a horrible month. And oh, by the way, since you paid the credit card bill in January, guess what you're not doing in February? You're not spending any money, except on Valentine's Day when you're going out on February 15th or the 13th instead of the 14th because you can't get a damn reservation.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, your thoughts, Heather?
I didn't realize you were quite so high maintenance about getting your reservation and having your birthday and what you're going to watch. Be a little flexible, Joe.
there was
Women's basketball is awesome.
Daytona 500 is in February.
Oh, it is.
A lot of noise
don't
there.
like-
But all we heard was, it's your birthday.
Right.
You're actually fishing for presents from an entire television
That was-
audience?
Well-
Have you no shame?
I'm not fishing at all because
That's all
my
I
birthday
heard.
is
It's my
exactly
birthday.
6 days from now on February 16th when I was born at 11:21 a.m. and my email is joeconcha@rocketmail.com in
Now
case
give
you want
your
to send
address so
an
they can send
e-card.
checks.
That's a very good point. We should do that. Anyway, we got to go to break. Coming up, an all-women's college is becoming more diverse, but that doesn't mean there aren't letting men enroll. The story is next. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everyone. I'm your calmer host, Joe Concha. For the past 3 years, the debate about gender identity and gender rights has been gaining momentum. We've seen that. Elementary schools have been discussing how to best deal with transgender students in terms of bathroom use. And now Bryn Mawr College, an all-women's liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, I believe right outside of Philadelphia, is joining the conversation by announcing they will start admitting individuals who, quote, live and identify as women to their campus. Under the gender identity and expression section on their site, they say Bryn Mawr College is committed to developing and fostering a safe place and successful living and learning environment for our diverse and multicultural student population in which all members are valued. As a women's college, we recognize that society's understanding of human diversity is evolving, and that the diversity includes a range of gender identities and expressions. Bryn Mawr fosters an environment of self-expression that is respectful, safe, and accepting of all members of its community. In addition to those applicants who were assigned female at birth, the applicant pool will be inclusive of, but not including, trans women and intersex individuals who live and identify as women at the time of application, or intersex individuals who do not identify as male. You keeping up with all this? And those assigned female at birth who have taken medical or legal steps to identify as male are not eligible for admission. Bryn Mawr goes on to say that, quote, in cases where an applicant's gender identity is not clearly reflected in their application materials, the college may request, I don't know how they're going to get this, additional information to affirm gender. I saw 16 Candles once when they had to affirm when something went on. I doubt that will be part of the whole thing. Anyway, inside joke. Heather, you're a woman as far as I can tell. Let me get your thoughts on Bryn Mawr College.
I think they're trying to be open-minded. It's what they are all about, and they're willing to accept that there's going to be some risks here. You know, there's going to be potential litigation. There are going to be some people on both sides who are going to have problems with this policy, but they are all about diversity. They're all about being open, and they're willing to take on those risks, and I applaud it.
Rick, any chance they get in the Big East next year?
I don't know, man. I took a nap during all that. Could you repeat that?
Oh, sure.
Would you?
Not a problem.
Who cares? Live and let live, and if they can play in the Big East, God bless them.
All right, Beatles quote, very good. Mr. John.
You know, I think there is issues here where they say safe and open society. I think safety is an issue because, as Rick will show you, there's people who do anything to get a date, and you know they really do need to watch, because there are people though that will do stuff and use this to their advantage, and maybe they have an agenda or whatever. But I see special interest all over this, and I do have, and maybe people can tweet me, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but when did the equal rights of homosexuals get complicated with transgender? I don't know when that transition happened, but I think those are two different issues, and I think they should be looked at differently.
But who cares?
But,
I mean, if you don't have to go to Bryn Mawr, if you're
Well, right, and if you're
true.
going there,
But
you
that's a
know
question
what
I
you're
just do
getting.
want to know. When did those things get milked together? I think those are
these are
two
the
different
things that
issues.
keep you up at night? Yeah.
No, not really. But we're talking about it. So
What do we do, Heather, about the signs for the bathrooms and how dorm rooms are assigned? Because that's usually same gender kind of thing.
They're going to have to figure it all out, but I would think that it would be based in great part about what the people actually want. I think the majority of people who are going to be there are going to identify as women, and most of the women who are true women who are there are not going to care. I mean, like Rick said, I wouldn't care. If I was there, I wouldn't care. You know, it's not, I don't think that very many men are going to try and sneak in and try to get dates.
yeah, but I like the way they say
If
this.
they do, man, that's commitment.
Applicants
that's
that
You gotta
really
love it.
no
applicants
joke.
that identified as being a female when they applied. It doesn't say people that stay that way, and that to me
What's
is a
Bryn
very,
Mawr's
very
brother's school?
interesting part of
I
this
don't know
whole
if they
thing.
have one.
If they haven't, just go to that school. It's a lot easier than
Right.
having to dress up every day.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think-
Complicated world out there.
It's the type of school where this is what you would expect from them, and that's, you know what you get when you're going there, and you know you're going to get a very open education. They already have classes in gender assignments and that type of thing. So it's not a surprise to anybody who's applying to that school, I don't think.
What about female students who identify as male who already enrolled?
I think that the statement sort of addresses that, but I don't think the people who are already there, I don't think will get kicked out. And again, this is going to be case by case, because the lawyers are going to have a real finger on the pulse of all of this to make sure that it works. Because once people start contesting it, they could really have a problem. I just don't see you're going to see a lot of people contesting it.
I don't either. Not at Bryn Mawr. It's just not the nature of
It's
that
not like
particular
it's the
school.
Naval Academy.
Yeah,
I named my baby daughter, my wife and I named our baby daughter Cameron. And when we first had her in a couple of pictures, she was wearing blue, and we put it up on Facebook, and half the responses were, "He's so handsome," because we went with an androgynous name.
Right.
So,
On purpose?
what? No, I just thought it was a cool name.
Yes, I like
I
it.
like there's something about Mary. I always kind of had a thing for Cameron Diaz.
Yeah.
It's a kind of an Irish name, so we figured her parents would be satisfied. You know, so we went with this androgynous name, and then we see Ryans that are.
They'll
Right.
get over it.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Don't worry about it. They'll get over it.
They will, right?
Yeah.
Alex is another one,
Actually,
right?
my granddaughter's name is Stevie.
Stevie, really? Well, I never heard that for a girl before.
Stevie Nicks.
That's a good
Ah.
point. And on that note,
She
people,
wasn't
we got to
either.
go. We'll do it for tonight. Join us again tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, panel, for being here, and thank you for watching. I'm Joe Concha. This was the Daily Wrap on Newsmax TV.